It was a quiet evening in the small, picturesque town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The kind of evening where time seems to slow down, and the hum of crickets fills the air. But at Channel 9 News, a local station that rarely made headlines, something was about to unfold that would leave its staff, and the entire town, questioning everything they thought they knew. The first sign that something was off came from the newsroom's weather anchor, Lisa. Known for her meticulous attention to detail, Lisa was the kind of person who would notice if a single graphic was out of place. That night, as she prepared her segment, she noticed something peculiar on the radar. A strange, flickering signal had appeared in the hills surrounding the town. It wasn't a storm system or interference from nearby towers. It was something entirely unexplainable. "Is there an update on this anomaly?" she asked her colleague, Tom, a seasoned journalist with a knack for chasing down the most bizarre leads. Tom, sipping his third cup of coffee for the evening, gave her a puzzled look. "Anomaly? What anomaly?" he asked, walking over to her desk. Lisa pointed at the screen, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The radar showed a cluster of lights, bright, erratic, and pulsating in a pattern that didn't match anything they'd ever seen. Tom, intrigued but skeptical, joked, "Maybe it's just an equipment glitch. Or aliens." His attempt to lighten the mood didn't work. The longer they stared at the screen, the more unsettling it became. Tom decided to check the station's feeds for other reports, but before he could sit down, the power flickered. For a brief second, the room went completely dark, and then the lights snapped back on. The screens around them were filled with static. "What the—" Lisa muttered, her voice trailing off as she leaned closer to her monitor. The static cleared momentarily, revealing a chilling image, a shadowy figure standing on a deserted road. It wasn't a feed they recognized or had on file. The figure didn't move, but seemed to be watching. "Is this some kind of prank?" Tom asked, though the unease in his voice betrayed him. The newsroom buzzed with nervous energy. Phones started ringing, and emails flooded in from viewers across the area. Reports poured in of strange occurrences, pets barking uncontrollably, flickering lights, and a low humming noise that seemed to come from nowhere. Residents swore they saw odd shapes moving in the night, just beyond the glow of their porch lights. As the clock ticked closer to the live broadcast, tension in the newsroom grew. Lisa and Tom worked frantically to make sense of the bizarre footage, but answers eluded them. Then, just minutes before the show was set to go live, the newsroom received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "Don't air it." Attached was a grainy video file. When Lisa and Tom clicked play, their faces drained of color. The footage showed the same shadowy figure, but this time it was standing at the edge of the forest. The camera zoomed in slightly, and though the quality was poor, there was no mistaking it. The figure turned its head directly toward the camera and whispered something inaudible. "What did it say?" Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. Tom replayed the clip and adjusted the volume. This time, the whisper was louder, clearer. "They're watching you." Lisa and Tom stared at each other, their unease growing into fear. Who, or what, was watching? And why had it chosen to make its presence known through their station? As the live broadcast countdown began, the team faced a chilling decision. Do they air the strange footage and risk unsettling the entire town, or do they bury the story and ignore the warning? The clock struck 9 p.m., and the red light on the camera blinked on. "This is Channel 9 News," Tom began, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around him. "Tonight, we bring you a story unlike any other." But as the broadcast went live, something even stranger happened. The monitors in the studio flickered once more, and the shadowy figure appeared again, this time, directly on the studio feed. What happened next would leave West Virginia, and the world, stunned. As the shadowy figure flickered onto the live studio feed, the newsroom froze. Every pair of eyes locked onto the monitors, and a suffocating silence filled the room. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It simply loomed there, a haunting silhouette against a backdrop of static. For the viewers at home, it must have seemed like a technical glitch, a bizarre one, but nothing more. Inside the studio, however, the team knew better. This wasn't an accident. Lisa's hands shook as she adjusted her headset, her voice trembling as she whispered to Tom through the earpiece. "Do you see that? Tell me I'm not losing my mind." Tom didn't respond. His focus was on the screen, his mind racing. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach, the kind he hadn't felt since his first assignment covering a devastating house fire years ago. There was an eerie weight in the air now, something he couldn't shake. The control room erupted in chaos as technicians scrambled to figure out where the feed was coming from. "This isn't from our cameras," one of them shouted. "It's being fed in externally. I can't shut it down." "How is that even possible?" Lisa demanded, her voice rising in panic. "Who could hack into our live broadcast like this?" No one had answers. The newsroom phones were lighting up again, this time with frantic calls from viewers. People wanted to know what they were seeing, why it was happening, and, most disturbingly, some claimed they had seen the same figure in their own neighborhoods earlier that evening. Tom made a snap decision and signaled to Lisa. "Keep talking. Don't let this derail us." Lisa nodded, her professionalism kicking in despite the growing fear. She turned to the camera, her voice steady but her eyes betraying her unease. "We're experiencing some technical difficulties tonight, folks, but we'll continue to bring you updates as they come in. Please stay tuned." As the broadcast continued, Tom slipped out of the studio and headed toward the control room. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to get them standing under the bright studio lights. The hallway felt darker than usual, the fluorescent bulbs overhead casting long, flickering shadows. Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone, though he was certain no one else had followed him. In the control room, the atmosphere was tense. The tech team was frantically analyzing the mysterious feed, their screens filled with lines of code and error messages. "Tom, you've got to see this," one of them said, gesturing him over. The technician pointed to a screen displaying the broadcast signal's metadata. "This feed isn't local. It's coming from somewhere miles away, deep in the hills. The location is scrambled, but it's definitely not from around here." Tom frowned. "So, someone out there, maybe in the middle of nowhere, is sending this to us? Why? What do they want?" The tech shrugged helplessly. "I don't know, but it's sophisticated. This isn't some prank by a bored teenager. Whoever did this knows exactly what they're doing." Tom's mind raced as he pieced the fragments together. The strange radar signal, the anonymous email, the figure on the screen, it was all connected. But how? And why target a small-town news station? Back in the studio, Lisa was doing her best to hold the broadcast together. She cycled through routine news stories, trying to distract viewers from the unsettling interruption. But the shadowy figure remained a ghost in her mind, haunting her every word. Then, as the broadcast neared its end, another email arrived. This time, it was addressed to Lisa directly. The subject line read, "Your turn to listen." The message was brief but chilling. "You've seen us. Now, hear us. Come alone to 47.235 N, 81.125 W. Midnight. No cameras. No crew. No police." Lisa stared at the screen, her heart pounding. The coordinates were unfamiliar, but a quick search revealed their location, a desolate stretch of forest road just outside of town. The kind of place people avoided after dark. She didn't want to believe it was real, but the sense of foreboding in the message was undeniable. Someone, or something, was trying to lure her out into the night. But why her? Why now? She showed the email to Tom, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do we do? If I go, I could be walking into something dangerous. But if I don't," she trailed off, the weight of the situation sinking in. Tom hesitated. He didn't like the idea of Lisa going alone, but he also knew this was their only lead. Whoever sent the message clearly wanted to make contact, and ignoring it could mean losing their only chance to uncover the truth. "I'll follow you," Tom said finally. "From a distance. If anything happens, I'll be close by." Lisa nodded, grateful for his support. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, they left the station together, the night air heavy with tension. The town was eerily quiet, the streets deserted. Even the usual hum of late-night traffic seemed absent, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The road to the coordinates was winding and narrow, cutting through dense woods that seemed to swallow the headlights of Lisa's car. Tom followed at a safe distance, his own nerves frayed. He kept his phone on the passenger seat, ready to call for help if needed. When Lisa finally reached the location, she parked her car on the shoulder and stepped out. The air was cold, the kind of chill that seeped into your bones. She looked around, her flashlight cutting through the darkness, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing faintly. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from the shadows, came a low, rhythmic hum, the same sound that had been reported by townspeople earlier that evening. It grew louder, more intense, as though it was coming from all directions at once. Lisa's flashlight flickered, and she felt a wave of unease wash over her. She turned, scanning the area, and that's when she saw it. The shadowy figure was standing just a few yards away, its outline barely visible against the trees. "Who are you?" Lisa demanded, her voice shaking. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised a hand and pointed to the ground in front of her. Lisa hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to run. But curiosity, and a strange sense of obligation, compelled her to step closer. The ground where the figure pointed was freshly disturbed, as though something had been buried there recently. Lisa knelt down, her hands trembling as she brushed away the dirt. Beneath the surface was a small, weathered box. She looked up to ask the figure what it was, but it was gone. Vanished into the night without a sound. Lisa's hands shook as she lifted the box. It was surprisingly light, its surface covered in strange symbols she didn't recognize. She felt a sudden rush of dread, as though whatever was inside wasn't meant to be found. From his car, Tom watched the scene unfold, his heart pounding. He wanted to call out to Lisa, to tell her to stop, but something held him back. He didn't know if it was fear or instinct, but he felt like they were crossing a line they couldn't uncross. Lisa stood there, the box in her hands, her mind racing with questions. What was inside? Who, or what, had led her here? And most terrifying of all, what would happen now that she had it? The hum faded into silence, and the forest was still once more. But Lisa and Tom both knew this was far from over. They had only scratched the surface of a mystery that was darker and more dangerous than anything they had imagined. Lisa stood frozen, the strange box cradled in her hands. She felt an inexplicable weight to it, not in its physical form but in the significance it seemed to carry. The forest around her was eerily quiet now, the rhythmic hum having disappeared as suddenly as it had begun. Every instinct told her to put the box down and leave, but something about it wouldn't let her. It was as though it had a pull of its own, tethering her to the moment. Tom stepped out of his car, unable to stay back any longer. The darkness seemed heavier now, pressing down on him as he approached Lisa. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. Lisa barely nodded, her gaze still fixed on the box. "I don't know what this is," she whispered. "But it feels wrong. Like it shouldn't be here." Tom studied the box, its strange symbols catching the faint glow of the flashlight. "We need to get this back to the station," he said finally. "Maybe we can figure out what it is. Or at least who sent us here." Reluctantly, Lisa agreed. They made their way back to their cars, every crunch of leaves underfoot sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. As they drove back to the station, neither of them spoke, the weight of what had just happened hanging heavy between them. When they arrived, the newsroom was nearly empty, save for a few overnight staff members. Tom and Lisa slipped into the conference room and placed the box on the table. The symbols on its surface seemed even more intricate under the fluorescent lights, their meaning as elusive as ever. Tom grabbed a notepad and started sketching the designs. "Maybe we can look these up," he suggested. "They've got to mean something." Lisa, however, couldn't take her eyes off the box itself. She reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against the lid. It was cold to the touch, far colder than it should have been. With a deep breath, she tried to open it, but the lid wouldn't budge. It was sealed tight, as though it was never meant to be opened. "Maybe that's a sign," Tom said, watching her struggle. "If it's locked, maybe it's supposed to stay that way." Lisa shook her head. "Then why go through all this trouble to lead us to it? They wanted us to find it. They wanted us to do something with it." Before they could debate further, the lights in the room flickered, plunging them into momentary darkness. When the lights returned, the box was glowing faintly, a soft, pulsating light emanating from within. Both Lisa and Tom stepped back instinctively, their hearts racing. "Tell me you saw that," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw it," Tom replied, his eyes wide. "What the hell is this thing?" The glowing stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving the box looking as ordinary as before. But they both knew it was anything but ordinary. The next day, Lisa and Tom decided to take a different approach. They reached out to a local historian, Evelyn Carter, who had a reputation for uncovering the region's most obscure and unsettling stories. When they showed her the sketches of the symbols, Evelyn's expression darkened. "These markings," she said slowly, "aren't just random. They're ancient. Appalachian folklore is full of stories about symbols like these, marks of protection, warnings, or invitations. They were used to communicate with things beyond our understanding." Lisa frowned. "Things? Like what?" Evelyn hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Some say they're spirits. Others believe they're entities from another dimension. Whatever they are, they don't operate by our rules. If these symbols are on that box, it's because someone wanted to send a very clear message." "Which is?" Tom asked. "Stay away," Evelyn said firmly. "Whatever is in that box, it's not meant for us to tamper with. The fact that you were led to it is already a bad sign. You've been marked now, whether you like it or not." The weight of her words hung in the air. Lisa and Tom exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of their situation sinking in. But neither of them was ready to walk away. That night, they returned to the station to continue their research. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that the box was more than just a warning. It was a key. A key to something bigger than either of them could comprehend. As they pored over articles and local legends, the newsroom grew quiet. Too quiet. Tom looked up from his laptop and noticed the silence first. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Lisa shook her head. "I don't hear anything." "Exactly," Tom said. "Where's the usual background noise? The printers, the hum of the monitors? It's like everything just stopped." Before Lisa could respond, the box began to glow again, this time brighter than before. The light pulsed faster and faster, filling the room with an otherworldly hum. Then, with a loud click, the lid popped open. Lisa and Tom froze, staring at the now open box. Inside was a small, black stone, smooth and polished to a mirror-like finish. It seemed to absorb the light around it, creating an unsettling void in its place. Lisa reached out, but Tom grabbed her wrist. "Don't," he said firmly. "We don't know what it is. We don't know what it'll do." "We didn't come this far to stop now," Lisa argued, her voice trembling but resolute. Before Tom could stop her, she picked up the stone. The moment her fingers touched it, the room was plunged into darkness. The hum grew deafening, and Lisa felt a surge of energy course through her body, a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. When the lights returned, Lisa was standing motionless, the stone still in her hand. Her eyes were wide, her breathing shallow. Tom shook her gently. "Lisa, are you okay?" She blinked, as though coming out of a trance. "I saw something," she whispered. "What did you see?" Tom asked, his voice urgent. Lisa hesitated, her expression distant. "I don't know how to describe it. It was like glimpses, flashes of something vast and ancient. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alive in the way we understand life. But it's watching us. And it's waiting." Tom's blood ran cold. "Waiting for what?" Lisa shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not done with us yet." Tom glanced at the stone, then back at Lisa. He felt the overwhelming sense that they had crossed a line, one they couldn't uncross. Whatever they had uncovered, it was far from over, and the worst was yet to come. The newsroom felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Lisa placed the stone back in the box, but it didn't feel like enough. Its presence lingered, like an unseen force pressing against her chest. Tom paced the room, his mind racing to make sense of everything. They had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding, and each step deeper felt like it was pulling them into a place they couldn't escape. Lisa rubbed her temples, her voice trembling as she broke the silence. "It's not just watching. It's calling. I can feel it." Tom stopped mid-step, his jaw tightening. "What does that even mean? Calling you for what?" Lisa shook her head, tears glinting in her eyes. "I don't know. But it's not just me. It's pulling us both in. I felt it when I touched the stone. It knows we're here. It knows everything." Tom's skin prickled at her words. He hated how much they rang true. Everything about this felt orchestrated, as if every choice they'd made had been guided by some unseen hand. He turned back to the box, its faint glow barely visible now. "We need to destroy it," he said firmly. "Whatever this is, it's dangerous. We can't let it stay here." Lisa hesitated, her eyes flicking back to the box. What if destroying it makes things worse? What if it's the only thing keeping whatever this is contained? Tom opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the lights flickered again. This time, they didn't come back on. The room plunged into pitch darkness, and the hum returned, louder and more oppressive than ever. Lisa's breath hitched. "Tom," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise. "I'm here," he said, his voice steady but tense. He reached out blindly, finding her hand. "Stay close." The hum grew deeper, resonating in their chests like the beating of an enormous, invisible heart. Then, faintly at first, came the whispers. They were low and unintelligible, like voices carried on the wind, but they grew louder, clearer, with each passing second. Lisa clutched Tom's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Do you hear that?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "I hear it," Tom said, his voice tight. The whispers surrounded them, filling the room with a cacophony of overlapping voices. They weren't speaking any language Tom or Lisa recognized, but the meaning behind the words seeped into their minds like poison. It was a warning, a threat, a promise. Then, as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. The lights flickered back on, and the room was eerily still. But Lisa and Tom both knew they weren't alone. In the corner of the room, the shadowy figure stood, its presence more solid than before. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but its mere existence seemed to warp the space around it. Lisa felt her knees weaken, a cold sweat breaking out across her skin. Tom stepped forward, his fear overridden by a surge of defiance. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the silence. The figure didn't respond, but the box on the table began to glow again. This time, the symbols on its surface pulsed with a strange, rhythmic light, as if syncing to an unseen heartbeat. Lisa felt the pull again, stronger now. She took a step toward the box, unable to stop herself. "It wants us to open it," she said, her voice distant. Tom grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "No. We don't know what's inside. We can't." The figure raised a hand, and Tom was thrown backward as if struck by an invisible force. He hit the wall hard, gasping for breath. Lisa cried out, but the pull toward the box was overpowering. It was as if her body was no longer her own. She reached for the stone again, her fingers trembling as they made contact. The moment she touched it, the room seemed to dissolve around her. The newsroom vanished, replaced by a vast, endless void filled with swirling lights and shadows. In the void, Lisa saw glimpses of things she couldn't comprehend. Massive structures that defied physics, creatures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, and an overwhelming presence that radiated both power and malice. "You have awakened us," a voice boomed, reverberating through the void. It wasn't a single voice but a chorus, as though countless entities were speaking in unison. Lisa tried to speak, but no words came. The presence pressed down on her, filling her mind with images and emotions that weren't her own. She felt its hunger, its anger, its longing to break free. Back in the newsroom, Tom struggled to his feet, his vision blurry. He saw Lisa standing motionless, her eyes glowing faintly. The shadowy figure had moved closer, its form shifting and flickering like a broken projection. "Lisa!" Tom shouted, his voice cracking. He stumbled toward her, reaching out to pull her away from the box. The moment he touched her shoulder, the void shattered. Lisa gasped, collapsing into his arms as the newsroom came back into focus. The shadowy figure was gone, but the box remained, its glow fading until it looked like nothing more than an ordinary object. Lisa clung to Tom, her body trembling. "It's not over," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's coming. It's already here." Tom held her close, his own fear mounting. He didn't know what it was, but he could feel its presence, lingering just beyond the edges of their reality. Whatever they had unleashed, it wasn't going to stop. They both knew they were running out of time. The question wasn't whether they could stop it, it was whether they could survive long enough to try. Tom and Lisa sat in the dimly lit conference room, the air thick with an unspoken dread. The box, now silent and inert, sat between them like a dormant volcano, its potential for destruction looming over every breath they took. Lisa's hands trembled as she held a cup of coffee she didn't even want, the warmth doing little to chase the chill that had settled into her bones. Tom, rubbing the back of his neck, tried to ground himself, but his mind was racing. "It's coming," Lisa repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how or when, but it's already started." Tom stared at her, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean? What's started?" Lisa shook her head, frustrated with the inability to put her experience into words. "It's hard to explain. It's like, whatever I saw when I touched the stone, it wasn't just a vision. It was a message. A warning. And it wasn't just for us, it's for everyone." Tom leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting to the box. "We need to figure out what this thing is. If it's some kind of conduit or a signal, we can't just sit here waiting for it to make the next move." As if in response to his words, the room's fluorescent lights flickered again, casting unsettling shadows across the walls. Both of them froze, their eyes darting toward the box. But this time, it wasn't glowing. Instead, a low, rhythmic tapping echoed through the room. "Do you hear that?" Lisa asked, her voice tight. Tom nodded, rising slowly to his feet. The sound was faint but deliberate, like fingers drumming against glass. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the walls in a maddening pattern. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the tapping stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse, heavy and suffocating. Tom glanced at Lisa, his expression a mix of fear and determination. "We need help," he said. "We're in over our heads." Lisa hesitated, her eyes darting back to the box. "Who could help us with this? The historian already said we shouldn't have opened it. And after what just happened, I'm not sure anyone would even believe us." Tom pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts. "There's someone who might," he said. "An old friend of mine, Mark. He's a researcher, works in cryptography and fringe science. If anyone can make sense of this, it's him." Lisa didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue. At this point, they had nothing to lose. Later that night, Mark arrived at the station, his worn leather bag slung over one shoulder and a skeptical look on his face. He was taller than Tom remembered, his presence commanding despite his casual demeanor. "So," he said, setting his bag down on the table. "You've got something strange to show me?" Tom gestured toward the box, now draped in a cloth to keep it from drawing too much attention. "That's putting it mildly," he said. Mark pulled the cloth away, revealing the box. His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he didn't say anything right away. Instead, he pulled a pair of gloves from his bag and carefully inspected the markings. "Interesting," he murmured. "These symbols, they're not just decorative. They're functional. Like a kind of lock or seal." Lisa frowned. "A seal for what?" Mark didn't answer immediately. He continued studying the box, his fingers tracing the patterns without touching the surface directly. After a long pause, he looked up at them, his expression grave. "This isn't just some ancient artifact. It's a containment vessel. Whatever's inside, it wasn't meant to get out." Tom's stomach sank. "You mean we've already let it out?" Mark glanced at Lisa. "Not entirely," he said. "But you've triggered something. That glow, the symbols activating, it's all part of a process. And if I'm right, we're running out of time to stop it." Before they could process his words, the tapping returned. This time, it was louder, more insistent. Lisa clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "It's here," she said, her voice barely audible. The room grew colder, the air thick with an unnatural energy. Mark stood, his posture tense but focused. "Whatever you do, don't touch the box again," he warned. "It's feeding off of you, off your curiosity, your fear." Tom stepped closer to Lisa, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "What do we do, then? Just sit here and wait for it to finish whatever it's doing?" Mark shook his head, pulling a small device from his bag. It looked like a cross between a handheld scanner and a radio. "No," he said. "We're going to disrupt it. This device emits a specific frequency that can interfere with electromagnetic fields. If the box is using some kind of energy to communicate or activate, this should throw it off." Lisa's eyes widened. "And if it doesn't?" Mark didn't answer. Instead, he switched on the device, and a high-pitched whine filled the room. The tapping stopped instantly, replaced by an eerie silence. For a moment, it seemed like the device was working. But then the box began to vibrate, the symbols glowing brighter than ever. The hum returned, louder and more menacing, and the shadowy figure reappeared, this time standing directly behind Mark. "Mark!" Lisa screamed, but it was too late. The figure reached out, its form flickering like a distorted image on a broken screen. Mark froze, his eyes widening in terror as the shadow's hand passed through his chest. The device fell from his hand, clattering to the floor as he collapsed. The shadow vanished again, leaving only the glowing box and the sound of Lisa's sobs. Tom knelt beside Mark, shaking him desperately, but it was no use. He was gone. The box's glow began to fade, its energy seemingly drained for now, but the damage was done. Lisa looked at Tom, her face pale and tear-streaked. "This isn't just about us anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "Whatever that thing is, it's getting stronger. And it's not going to stop." Tom nodded, his jaw set with grim determination. "Then we have to find a way to stop it. Before it takes anyone else, or anything else." The stakes had never been higher, and the weight of their next move pressed down on them like a storm cloud ready to break. Time was running out, and the true scope of what they were up against was only just beginning to reveal itself. The newsroom was silent, save for the faint hum of the box, now faint and sporadic like a dying heartbeat. Tom and Lisa stood over Mark's lifeless body, their breaths shallow, their minds racing. Neither of them spoke, the weight of what had just happened hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Tom clenched his fists, his jaw set with determination. "We're ending this," he said finally, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "No more waiting, no more guessing. Whatever's in that box, whatever it's calling, we're stopping it now." Lisa wiped at her face, her resolve hardening. "How? Mark's gone, and everything we've tried has only made it worse." Tom crouched beside Mark's bag, rummaging through the contents until he found the device Mark had used earlier. It was damaged, sparks flickering from its edges, but Tom held onto it like a lifeline. Mark might have been right about disrupting the energy. If we can amplify this thing, maybe we can overload it, shut the box down for good. Lisa hesitated, her eyes darting to the box. The glow was faint now, almost imperceptible, but she could feel its presence like a low thrum beneath her skin. "And if it doesn't work?" Tom looked at her, his expression grim. "Then we'll at least go down trying." Together, they gathered what they could from Mark's bag: tools, wires, and a small notebook filled with cryptic diagrams and hastily scrawled notes. Lisa flipped through the pages, her eyes narrowing as she tried to make sense of the symbols. "Wait," she said, pointing to a sketch that mirrored the markings on the box. They're not just a seal. They're a map. Or instructions." Tom leaned over, his brow furrowing. "Instructions for what?" Lisa traced the lines with her finger, her voice trembling. "For containing it. Or for opening it completely." Tom's stomach dropped. "We're not opening it," he said firmly. "We're shutting it down." But Lisa's expression was conflicted. What if shutting it down isn't enough? What if it's like a fire? We can snuff out the flames, but the embers are still there, waiting to ignite again. Tom shook his head. "We don't have time to debate this. We stick to the plan." As they worked to repair and modify the device, the room grew colder, the hum of the box growing louder again. The shadowy figure began to materialize once more, its form sharper and more defined than before. It didn't attack this time, it simply stood there, watching. Lisa's hands trembled as she connected the final wire, the device emitting a low whine as it powered on. "It's ready," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom stepped forward, holding the device toward the box. The hum intensified, the glow brightening until it was almost blinding. The symbols on the box shifted and writhed, as though alive. The shadowy figure moved closer, its presence oppressive and suffocating. "Do it!" Lisa shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Tom pressed the button, and the device emitted a piercing sound that seemed to cut through the air like a blade. The box shook violently, the glow flickering and fading. The shadowy figure let out an unearthly wail, its form distorting and collapsing in on itself. For a moment, It seemed like they had succeeded. The box's hum stopped, the glow extinguished, and the room fell into an eerie silence. Tom and Lisa exchanged a glance, relief washing over them. But then, the silence was broken by a low, guttural laugh. Lisa's blood ran cold as she turned toward the box. It was open. Inside was not a stone, but a swirling mass of darkness, pulsing with a malevolent energy that seemed to reach out and grasp at the edges of reality itself. The shadowy figure reformed, more powerful than ever, its shape now fully solid and towering over them. "You thought you could stop it," the figure said, its voice a deep, resonant growl. "But you were only a part of the plan." Tom and Lisa froze, the weight of the realization hitting them like a tidal wave. They hadn't stopped the box, they had unleashed its true power. The figure raised a hand, and the room began to warp and shift, the walls dissolving into a void of swirling shadows and light. Tom grabbed Lisa's hand, pulling her close as they were engulfed by the darkness. The last thing Lisa saw before everything went black was the box, its symbols glowing brighter than ever, as if mocking them. When the light returned, they were no longer in the newsroom. They stood in a vast alien landscape, the air thick and heavy, the sky a swirling mass of colors and shapes that defied logic. The figure loomed before them, its presence dominating the space. "This is the end," it said, its voice echoing through the void. But as Tom and Lisa stood together, their fear was replaced by a determination they hadn't felt before. They had unleashed this nightmare, but they weren't going to let it win. The final battle was just beginning. Tom and Lisa stood frozen in the strange, alien landscape. The oppressive presence of the shadow loomed over them, its form shifting and flickering like a living nightmare. The air was heavy, vibrating with an unnatural hum that made it hard to breathe. Yet, despite the terror clawing at their hearts, something stronger was beginning to take root: resolve. Lisa tightened her grip on Tom's hand, her voice trembling but firm. "We started this. We have to finish it." Tom nodded, his jaw set. "We're not running. Not this time." The shadow laughed again, its voice rumbling like distant thunder. "You think you can defeat me? You've already lost. I am everywhere. I am everything. You are nothing." Lisa's mind raced as she looked around the surreal landscape. The sky twisted in impossible ways, and the ground beneath their feet pulsed with the same energy that had emanated from the box. She realized the key wasn't to fight the shadow directly, it was to sever its connection to the power it was drawing. "Tom," she said, urgency in her voice. "It's feeding off this place. We need to disrupt it, just like before." Tom glanced at her, catching on quickly. "The device, it's back in the newsroom." Lisa shook her head. "No, it's here. Look." To their right, the remnants of the device lay scattered on the ground, its parts distorted but still recognizable. Lisa darted toward it, her movements quick and desperate. The shadow surged toward her, but Tom stepped in its path, yelling to draw its attention. "Over here!" Tom shouted, grabbing a chunk of rock and throwing it at the shadow. The object passed through its form harmlessly, but it hesitated, turning its full focus on him. Lisa crouched by the pieces of the device, her fingers fumbling as she tried to reassemble it. The wires sparked as she twisted them together, the components barely holding their shape. Sweat dripped down her forehead, but she forced herself to stay calm. The shadow lashed out at Tom, sending a wave of energy that knocked him to the ground. He groaned in pain but pushed himself back up, glaring at the entity. "You'll have to do better than that," he muttered, his voice strained but defiant. Lisa connected the final wire, and the device sprang to life with a faint whine. She looked up at Tom. "I've got it." The shadow turned toward her, realizing the threat. It moved faster now, its form stretching and shifting as it charged. Lisa didn't hesitate. She flipped the switch, and the device emitted a high-pitched frequency that made the very air tremble. The shadow froze, its form rippling violently. The ground beneath them began to crack, the pulses of energy faltering and fading. Lisa adjusted the settings on the device, amplifying the frequency. The shadow let out a deafening roar, its shape splintering like glass. Tom staggered to Lisa's side, shielding her as the world around them began to collapse. The sky above fractured, beams of light piercing through the darkness. The shadow writhed and twisted, its form shrinking as the energy sustaining it was stripped away. "You can't destroy me," it bellowed, its voice growing weaker. "I will return. I am eternal." Lisa met its gaze, her fear replaced by unwavering determination. "Not today," she said, turning the device to its highest setting. With one final, ear-splitting shriek, the shadow imploded, collapsing into itself until it was nothing more than a wisp of smoke. The ground beneath them steadied, the sky returning to a calm, pale blue. The device fell silent, its purpose fulfilled. Tom and Lisa stood in the quiet aftermath, the alien landscape dissolving around them. They found themselves back in the newsroom, the box lying inert on the table. The symbols were gone, the hum silenced. Tom exhaled shakily, glancing at Lisa. Did we actually do it?" Lisa nodded, her body trembling from the adrenaline. "It's over," she said, though her voice was tinged with caution. "At least, for now." They called the authorities to report everything, though they left out the more fantastical elements. Mark's death was ruled a tragic accident, and the box was confiscated by a government agency that promised to handle it. Tom and Lisa knew they wouldn't get any answers about what would happen to it, but they were okay with that. They had done their part. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be. The newsroom felt quieter, the weight of what had happened lingering in the air. Tom and Lisa worked together to rebuild their routines, but the experience had changed them. One evening, as they sat in the break room, Lisa broke the silence. "Do you think it's really gone? The shadow, I mean." Tom sipped his coffee, his gaze distant. "I don't know. But if it ever comes back, we'll be ready." Lisa smiled faintly, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Yeah," she said softly. "We will." As they left the station that night, the stars above seemed brighter, the air crisp and clear. For the first time in weeks, they felt a sense of peace. Whatever had been unleashed, they had faced it together, and survived. But in a locked high-security facility miles away, the box sat in a sterile, white room. The symbols on its surface began to glow faintly once more, a soft hum filling the air. The story wasn't over. Not entirely. But for now, Tom and Lisa had earned their rest. And whatever came next, they knew they wouldn't face it alone.